Hi everyone, I am Mahesh. In this video, we are going to discuss about jump statements in Java. There are two types of jump statements in Java: break and continue. Let us now discuss about these two statements with an example. I wanted to print numbers 1 to 10, and for that I am going to use for loop. For I'll start with 1 and my condition is the number should be less than or equal to 10, and then I wanted to display this number, that is I here. System.out.println I, right? So what does this loop does is it actually prints the number starting from 1. It checks the condition is true as 1 less than or equal to 10. So it enters into the loop and system.out.println prints the number I. So that is 1. It prints 1 on the console. So then goes back, increments the I by 1. So 2, again condition satisfied, 2 less than or equal to 10. So comes inside the loop and it displays the number 2 and so on, right? So on till 10. Once the I value becomes 10, so I value is displayed, then it is incremented by 1. So now I value is 11. 11 less than or equal to 10. Condition is false, so it comes out of the loop. So this is what happens, right, with this loop. In some cases, I wanted to come out of this loop even if this condition is true. That is my requirement. In such cases, we can use the break statement. So let's see an example. For example, so this loop continues for I equal to 1 till 10, right? But if I is equal to 5, I wanted to come out of this for loop. So for that, I can use break statement like this. So this is a block and you can see here. So what happens if first it displays 1, so this condition will not be satisfied, so 1 is displayed, then I is incremented 2, 3, 4, fine. When I becomes 5, so this condition will be satisfied, so it enters into this if block and you can see here a break statement, so which actually says Java to terminate the immediate loop. So immediate loop is this for loop, right? So this for loop will be terminated and comes out of the loop. So the output will be 1, 2, 3 and 4. That's all. So once first 4 numbers are displayed, I becomes 5 and this condition is satisfied. It enters into this if block, and as we have break statement here, so it comes out of this for loop, immediate loop. So this is use of break statement. Now let us understand continue statement. So continue with the same example. I am going to just replace this break with continue. What if I write continue here? So continue is used to skip the current iteration, meaning for example in this program, right, it has to display 1 to 10 numbers. So this condition will never met for 1, 2, 3 and 4, we know, right? Now what happens when I becomes 5? So it enters into this if block and it sees this continue statement. So what does continue statement does is it skips the statements which are below it. So it skips the execution of the statements which are mentioned below it and continues with the next iteration. That is, so I is 5 now, right? So it enters into the loop if block and continue. So it doesn't execute the statements which are below it. That is, this statement will not be executed and I will be incremented. So it actually jumps on to the next iteration. So I becomes 6 now. So 6 less than or equal to 10 is true. It comes here. Again, this condition will never met. So it displays the next number 6. In the same way, like 7, 8, 9 and 10 will be displayed, except for 5. Only if I is 5, this condition will be met, right? So only 5 will be skipped and all other numbers get displayed. So this is the use of continue statement. So to keep it short, so you can see break actually breaks the loop, immediate loop, even though the condition is true. Continue skips the execution of the statements below it and just skips only that iteration and jumps on to the next iteration. This is the main difference between break and continue. And this statements break and continue can be used in do while loop and while loop as well. Not only in for loop, they can be used in do while loop and while loop as well. Now that we have a fair understanding of these jump statements, let us understand about labeled for loop. And for that, let me take an example. So let's say for example I have some for loop here, and within this for loop I have, say for example, another for loop, right? And I wanted to actually display some code here, like I wanted to write some code here. This is my code and I am going to close this two for loops. This is a nested for loop, right? Now I wanted to actually use this break and continue inside this loops. So what happens? For example, here I have some code and I write break statement here. What does this do? It actually breaks the immediate loop, right? Immediate loop is this for loop. So we have two for loops. Observe here. This is one for loop and this is second for loop. So when I write break here, it actually breaks this second for loop and comes out of only this for loop, right? Now my requirement is I wanted to I have some condition here. When this condition is met, so I wanted to use this break statement and come out of this first loop, this loop, not this loop, not the immediate loop. Immediate loop I can achieve it with just writing break, right? But I wanted to come out of this outer loop. So how do we do that? So for that we can use labels in Java. So we can have some label. Say for example, I'll have some label as outer and colon for this for loop, and I'll have some label as inner above this for loop, right? Now each for loop has its own labels. Now what we can do here is, if I wanted to break this inner loop, I can just write it like this: break inner. So Java knows to break this inner for loop, but in this example, breaking this inner for loop with mentioning this inner or without mentioning, both are same, as it breaks the immediate for loop. But the advantage comes like when we actually wanted to break the outer loop. See, I'll just mention outer here. What happens? When some condition is met, it breaks the outer for loop. So it actually breaks this outer for loop. It is similar to like go to statement in other languages. So it goes back to this outer and breaks this outer loop. So this is the advantage of this labeled for loop. Now in the same way, if we wanted to use the continue statement instead of break, I wanted to use continue. Again same, like if I wanted to continue this inner loop, so what happens? For that iteration, whatever the statements which are written after this continue will be skipped and it jumps on to the next iteration. But if I wanted to actually continue the outer loop, right? So you can just mention this label outer, and then the continue, how it works, it just skips the statements which are below it, and then it jumps on to the next iteration which is mentioned in this outer for loop. So this is how the labeled for loop works. So inside this for loop you can have another for loop as well. This is just a nested for loop, and you can have any n number of for loops inside it, and each for loop should have its own label, so that you can actually use that label here either to break or continue that particular for loop based on the label. So this is the main advantage of labeled for loop. Now let us see an example on all this.
Let us create a new class. I'll name my class as jump statements. And let's see an example on break statement first. And for this, I'm going to print numbers 1 to 10 using while loop. For that, let me declare a variable I, which I'll initialize the value as 1, and will write my while loop with condition as I less than or equal to 10. And this loop has to continue 10 times, right? And each time it has to display the I value, and then I value should be incremented by 1. So let's execute this now. And you can see 1 to 10 numbers got displayed on the console, right? Now I wanted to break this while loop if my I value is 5. So even though this condition, this loop condition is true, I just wanted to break this loop on some particular condition. So for that, I am using break statement. Now let us just debug this program and verify. So I just kept my breakpoint here. So let me debug this program. Debug as Java application. Just press F6 here. So I value is initialized to 1 and condition is true as 1 less than or equal to 10 is true. So it enters into the while loop, and this condition will only be true if I is 5, right? So for the first time it will not be true. So it displays the value of I, that is 1. You can see it displays 1 in the console, and I is incremented uh, by 1. So I is 2 now. Again this condition will never met. So it displays the value as 2, 3, 4 as well. Fine. Now I value is 5. So this condition is true now. It should enter into the if block. Let's verify now. So it entered into the if block and it sees this break statement. And as break statement breaks the loop, so it comes out of the loop. You can see it clearly. So this is how break statement works. So break statement breaks the immediate loop, even though the loop condition is true. Irrespective of this condition result, so break actually breaks the loop. So this is how break statement works. Now let us see an example on continue statement. So for that, I am going to take the same example of displaying 1 to 10 numbers, but this time I'll use the for loop. I less than or equal to 10, I plus plus will display I value here. Okay, I already declared I value, right? So when I declared it here again, so it was giving error. Fine. So you can see 1 to 10 numbers got displayed. This time I'll take an example of now I just wanted to display only even numbers on the console. So if there is an odd number, then I wanted to skip that iteration. So that is my case. So that is my requirement. If I percentile 2, how do I know that if it is even number? So if it is even number, then when a number is divided by 2, it leaves the remainder as 0. If it is odd number, it leaves the remainder as 1, right? So if the remainder is 1, then I just wanted to skip that iteration. I just don't want to execute this statement. So I'm using this continue statement. Now let me debug this. See, I value is 1 now. So 1 is an odd number and this condition will be true. 1 percentile 2 is 1. So 1 is equal to 1 is true. So it should enter into this if block and continue statement is executed. So it will not execute the statement below it. So it goes back to the next iteration. Now let's see. I is 2 now. So this condition will be false. So it comes out of this. So this condition is false. So it executes this statement and displays the value as 2. This time 3 is an odd number, right? So this condition will be true. So again enters into the if block, continue. So that iteration will be skipped and we'll jump on to this next iteration. And for the next iteration, it is an even number. 4 is an even number, so this condition will be false. So the value will be displayed and so on. You can see it here. So when there is an odd number, it will be skipped using the continue statement. So this is how we should be using the continue statement. Now let's see an example on labeled for loop. For that, I'll take an example of two for loops. One with index I and another with index j, which will run for 3 times. Each loop will run for 3 times. So you can see I have nested for loop here. For loop within another for loop and will display I and j values. For each value of I, j will be running for 3 times. you can see it here, j is equal to 1 and j less than or equal to 3. So for each value of I, j runs for 3 times. Let us see this. Let me execute this. You can see here, for each value of I is fixed as 1 and j runs for 3 times with 1, 2 and 3 as values. And again, I value changes to 2 and it runs for 3 times again with 1 time each for j value. So you can clearly see it here. Now, I wanted to break this loop on some particular condition. If my I value is 2 and j value is also 2, I wanted to break this. First, let's break inner loop. So for that, we need to have labels on for each for loop. So the loop with the index I, I'll name it as outer, and loop with the index j, I'll name it as inner, and I'm going to break the inner loop. So let us debug this. I'll have breakpoint here, and let me debug this program now. Debug as Java application. So for I1 and j loop, right? So I is 1 now. So this condition will never be true. So it just displays the values for I and j. Fine. Now I has become 2. See clearly. I is 2 now, and it has to actually run 3 times for j value. 2, 1 is fine. Now j is also 2. Let's see the I and j values. I is 2 and j is also 2. So it has to enter the if block now. And it says break inner. So it should break the inner loop. That is loop with index j. See, it breaks and goes back to the outer loop. And now I value is 3. So this condition will never be true and the execution continues. Now let's break outer loop. So even though you have inner mentioned here or not, in this case, so it anyway breaks the immediate loop, right? So that won't make much difference even if you use inner label or not. But if I wanted to break this outer for loop, so how do we do that? So we just need to mention the loop label of that for loop. So I just wanted to break this outer for loop. So I mentioned the label here. Now let's verify. Let's debug it. See, when I is 1, this condition will never be true, right? So it just displays the values. Fine. Now when I is 2, uh, so j for the first time j will be 1. So the values got displayed. Now let's verify. I is 2 and j is also 2. It has to enter into the loop, sorry, into the if block, and then it sees break outer loop. Now it has to break the outer for loop and exit the program. See, it exited the program once it breaks the outer for loop. So this is the advantage of label for loop with break. Now let's see the same example with for continue. So if I have continue inner, so let's debug this and verify what happens. For I as 1, yeah, there will this condition will never make. Fine. Now I and j values are 2. So it enters into this if block, and continue inner is like skipping this iteration, like skip the execution of the statements which are below this continue and continue with the next iteration. See, this time it doesn't print this. It doesn't come for execution to this statement. It just skips this iteration and just goes back to the next iteration. And here on, from here, the execution continues. Only when I and j value are 2, so you can see 2, 1 are displayed, and only 2, 2, it just skipped that iteration. Rest of them got displayed as is. Just remember this output. Now we are going to use the outer label here for continue statement. Let's debug again. As there is no change for when the I value is 1, fine, I executed it. Now this condition is gonna become true. and it has to continue the outer loop. So what should happen? It should jump onto this outer loop, like exiting this for loop, this inner for loop, right? Let's see that. See, it goes back to the outer for loop, and now I value is 3, and the execution continues. See, it exited when I and j value are 2. It actually exited this complete inner for loop, and it actually went to the outer for loop, as it we have continuous statement here. So this is the difference between like having inner and outer when using the continuous statement. And this is an example on the label for loop. Like this, we can have any number of for loops within this for loop. And remember, each for loop should have its own label, so that we can use that label here either to break, either to use this break statement or continue statement according to our requirement. So in this video, we started with discussing about jump statements, break and continue, and we also saw examples on labeled for loop. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching.